Now that I've typed out some sample text and in some cases the beginning text for all the elements on my home page, I'm ready to start structuring this content using div tags in Dreamweaver. An HTML div tag is short for page division. It's a very useful way to organize and structure your page, and then later when we learn CSS or cascading style sheets, we can take those divs and very quickly and easily format or style our page to create the look that we want. Each div is basically a block of content that can contain text, images, videos, pretty much anything. In my case, all these areas that I've defined and labeled, such as the header, the top nav, the left nav, the content, the footer, and the container, are divs. And as you can see, the container contains all these blocks. So you can have divs within divs, which is a very useful way to structure your page. When I create divs to structure my HTML page, I always start from the biggest div and work my way down to the smaller ones. So in this case, I'm going to start with the container. I'll create a div for the container that contains everything on the home page. And then within container, I will create divs for header, top nav, left nav, and so on. So let's begin. So before I start inserting or creating my divs, I want to show you this very useful and really handy part of the Dreamweaver interface. These down here are your element selectors. So for example, if I go up here and click on, say, portfolio. Portfolio is one item within this list. So if I look down at my element selectors, I see the rightmost element is a list item. To the left of that is an unordered list or UL, and to the left of that is body. So as you can see, it shows you the biggest elements and then the smaller elements that contain them, that are contained in them, and then the even smaller elements that pinpoint exactly where your cursor is. Now my cursor is on the portfolio list item. So you can see when I click on list item, it highlights portfolio. This list item is within this unordered list. When I click on UL, it selects the whole unordered list, and in the code you can see it selects everything between UL and /UL, which is the code for this entire bulleted list. And then if I click body, it selects the entire content of the page, and over here in the code view you can see it selects everything between the body and /body tags. So this is a great way to select and pinpoint elements on your home page. Your container div will contain everything in the page body. So the easiest way to do this is go down to the element selectors, click body, that selects everything inside the page body, and then go up to the menu, the insert menu, and you can either go and click div right here, or you can go under structure and click div. We'll just use this because it's easier. So I say insert div, and this brings up the options for inserting a div. The first option is where do I want this div to be inserted. The default is wrap around selection, and this is why we selected everything in the body tags, which makes it so much easier to create our container div. So my container div is going to wrap around this whole selection, and then all I have to do is give it a name. I'm going to use the name container. Click OK. Dreamweaver creates this box around all my body content. If I mouse over the box, it turns red. If I click on the box, it selects that entire div called container. And as you can see, it even highlights it for me when my mouse is over the div, showing me that it's a div with an ID or name of container. An ID is Dreamweaver's way of identifying the name of an element. So that's how easy it is to select your content and create divs to wrap around it. So next, we will create a div for the header. As you can see from my sketch, my header contains my actual header content as well as my top nav div. So I'm going to select everything from here down to the end of my list. And then I go to Insert, Div, Wrap Around Selection, and call it Header. So now this has created a header div, which, as you can see in the code, it wraps around my sample text as well as my bulleted list. Moving on, I have my left nav, and when it comes to navigation, it's much easier to select the entire list using the element selectors. So I'm going to go down. Because my cursor is inside this list, I know that when I go down here and click UL, it's going to select this entire list for me. And then I go Insert, Div, and I'm going to call this left underscore nav. Now spaces are not allowed in the ID of any element or any div. So instead of a space, I'm using an underscore. Now moving on, this line represents my entire content area. So I select that line, or better still, I click in that line and select the paragraph from my element selector. Now I go Insert, Div, Wrap Around Selection, call it Content. Now down to the footer. The footer contains my entire list as well as this text. So I just select all of that, go to Insert, Div, again Wrap Around Selection, call it Footer, and click OK. And it's created a div called Footer, which contains my entire list and my dummy text. And that leaves my top navigation. For my top navigation, I go back up to my bulleted list here. I click on UL down in the element selectors, which highlights the entire unordered list, and then go to Insert, Div, Wrap Around Selection. Top underscore nav is the name I'm giving it, and these names are up to you. As long as you don't use spaces, just use letters and underscore. That should do. And there you have it. Now all of my sample content has been structured in divs. I can go and click on, let's say, the container in my code, and it shows me the container div on the right. If I go and click on header, it shows me the header. If I click on top nav, it shows me the top nav, and so on. Every time I go and click on a div in my code view, it highlights the entire div in my design view, which is why I like working in split view, so you can really do these things easily. And you can really see the relation between what we see over here and what the code behind it is. And there you have it. Our page is created and structured. Next, we will start styling our page using CSS.